Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Only Land Fan Show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Logan Fullmer. Logan Fullmer is a real estate investor and business owner who oversees a group of related companies that do land development, industrial income property, and distressed real property acquisition. These businesses have 20 people employed in office and do $30 to $40 million of annual revenue. Logan is passionate about educating novice or intermediate investors about distressed property acquisition because it's a more affordable business to start versus flipping homes or even wholesaling. Logan continues to offer coaching and training courses for those interested. Logan, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
Hey, I'm great, Kendall. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us again. We've had you on the show already, and you're back by popular demand. Very popular episode. So people can't get enough of Logan Fullmer. Super excited to have you back on to discuss distressed property acquisition. Before we jump into that, can you introduce yourself to the audience who may not know who you are yet and tell us how did you get started in real estate investing?
Sure, Kendall. First, I'll say thanks for having me. I always enjoy chatting with you. You're one of my favorite hosts because you're like an intelligent, attentive, zoned in person. So that's fun. Yeah, I got into real estate about 10 years ago, was easing my way out of the oil field and didn't know where I was headed next. So I started buying land and I got lucky and was hoping the land would increase in value because it was downtown in an undervalued city. And I got lucky and it did. That bet paid off big. But the problem there is I went back to the well and tried to find more good deals like that. And the values had gone up. I went back and examined a couple transactions that were the bigger margins that I had, and they were fixing these headaches. They were hassles at the time. But when I looked at a changed market, at this point it was 2017, 18 range, I thought these are opportunities to be very efficient with my capital. It's a very efficient use of capital. At the time, I had more money or more time than money. So I was willing to contribute a lot of time to fix these things. And it became a really interesting business model. Fast forward to today, 10 years later, I've got the operation you mentioned, attorney, private investigator, and genealogist here in the office. We have about 20 people, and we transact several hundred properties a year. So
Wow,
that's
really incredibly impressive team and operation. Can you dig in a little bit more about what were some of those patterns that you realized when you started seeing these distressed properties that people may not have noticed, but you did?
stepping back, looking down into the market at that time. There was opportunity. We'd go to the foreclosure auction and just buy things at the foreclosure auction and list it on MLS. I've never been a big fan of construction, although I've done some in the past. It was really easy to just buy something in an inefficient marketplace and bring it to an efficient marketplace and make money. But as everybody got involved, there was less opportunity for that. And folks shy away from the messes, frankly. People don't want to do it because it's a lot of work and you got to think. And so that was our big opportunity to look at these and sharpen our pencil and say, other people aren't doing this. It's going to take a lot of work. I don't know if this is going to become a business line, but I'm going to do the best I can. And it allowed us to continue to earn while we were expanding skills. But the neat thing is we didn't cap. Like flipping houses, it's really hard to build a big operation. Or subdivisions, you're limited to the inventory you can find and capital. This was interesting because capital could go much further. And there's absolutely no cap on the problems out there. They're everywhere. So yeah, things developed in that way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There's always a lot of talk around how the market is doing. With the current market that we're in right now, we have some people that are like Chicken Little, the sky is falling. Some people are like, it'll be fine. Can you talk a little bit about what market conditions are you currently seeing that are affecting these distressed property acquisitions?
So the market's much softer. Interest rates are far higher than they were a couple of years ago. Prices have softened quite a bit on almost every product. Now, the neat thing about this, so I did for several years wholesale commercial real estate. And as the market softened, that was the first thing to give way. The neat thing is that business there's not a lot of fixed assets required. There's not a lot of institutional framework for that. So the moment we said, wow, this business isn't working so much, we just stopped sending out cold calls and texts and leads. And a week later, that business was basically done. So that was very easy for us to turn that spigot off. But on the distressed property side, I've been doing that for 10 years, no matter what. We added in commercial wholesaling, but the distressed buying has been my core competency for almost to 10 years. And the cool part about that is Nothing has changed in our business in 10 years. The market was young when I started this. It matured, got to the top of the cycle, and then it softened again and came back closer to the bottom of the cycle. The neat thing is we've just continued to add people, capital, and volume like this. Despite the market going like this, we've gone like that. So let me put something out there for you like this. When we would sell something at the market, when I say the market, I say MLS. Since I'm not wholesaling, I'm paying for the stuff and taking it to the market. Best place for most buyers who are ready to go in one place is the listing service, MLS. So I would price it about 95 cents on the dollar. So just a hair below what the comps say. That way, it still sells fairly fast. Even when the market's hot, I'm selling faster than everybody. But when the market started to fall and people say, you can't sell investment grade products, that's not true. You can't sell it at the price you're trying to sell it for. But in my case, my basis is extremely low relative to most people. Usually I try to buy between 20 and 50 cents on the dollar. So if I'm selling at 95 cents on the dollar, I have a 45% margin, more or less. I can continue lowering my price until I finally hit the place where the market will absorb whatever it is I'm selling right then, whether it's a 7-acre rural lot or a beat up house in town or whatever it is. Just keep lowering the price. But most folks don't have the ability because they have a wholesale contract and they can't go below their A to B, or they flip the house and they're in it for 70 or 80 cents on the dollar and their margin is at 20%. They can't go lower than that. But since this model allows you to buy so much cheaper, you just keep lowering the price until you hit what the net market is now willing to bear. So I
Yeah.
found while the market's been weaker, I'm having to sell for about 80 cents on the dollar.
Imagine having a complete toolkit for success right at your fingertips. That's exactly what you get with Only Land Fans School, our premium online community. For a low monthly fee, access our treasure trove of resources, the on-market deals course, acquisitions tool suite, and Dispo Secrets library. Plus, connect with fellow flippers in our active community. Whether you're hunting for deals or closing sales, Only Land Fan School has you covered with step-by-step guidance and insider knowledge. Ready to supercharge your land flipping journey? Join Only Land Fan School at olfschool.com today. Got it. Yeah, that's fantastic. I love, there's so many great nuggets and lessons in there. I love the fact that you're able to pivot with the market. I think that being able to be flexible like that is what allows businesses to survive through different cycles. We know real estate is cyclical, right? And so
Yeah.
for those that are listening who may not be familiar with this term distressed property, outside of when we hear single family houses, we think distressed property means that it's fallen apart. Can you talk a little bit about what is your definition of distressed property?
A lot of people say, we buy distressed properties. I'm going to raise my desk. And when they say they buy distressed property, what they mean is something that's physically distressed. It needs a new roof. It's not in great condition. Someone could live in it, but there's opportunity to make money by repairing it. It's a distressed property. What they mean is deferred maintenance. That's what they usually mean.
Yeah.
In my case, distress, multiple owners, judgments and liens, breaks in the title chain, delinquent taxes, distressed from a paperwork, ownership, and title perspective. Many times your eyes can see the distress like other people talk about, but many times it can't. I bought an office building that's in good condition. It was wrapped up in a bankruptcy. So you drive by and it looks normal. Ownership has real problems.
Yeah.
So that's what we're looking for is we're looking for the problems with paperwork. We're looking for title problems. That's a big difference.
Yeah, that's really good. So in your business model, are you going after particular asset classes that are distressed, or is it like if it's a distress, bring it on? We do land, commercial. What's your approach to that? Hey, land fans, looking for your tribe of serious land investors? Join thousands of your fellow land lovers in the Only Land Fans Facebook group. We're talking real deals, expert strategies, and game-changing connections you won't find anywhere else. This isn't just another real estate group. This is the community where land investors come to level up. Join us at onlylandfansgroup.com and join the conversation today. That's onlylandfansgroup.com. See you there.
Actually, that's interesting you bring that up because folks a lot of times say, Logan, I know you're in commercial real estate. I know you do land development by warehouses. How do I find that distressed? And I'm like, whoa, you're mixing football and soccer rules, man. And
Yeah.
people get confused. They don't understand that. Why that is so important is I want people to understand we're shopping by distress.
Mm.
So when you shop by distress, you want that funnel at the top to be as wide as it can be, anything in distress. But if you say, I'm shopping by distress, but I only want multifamily and I only want it in Travis County and I only want this, there might only be 6 of those in the whole county. So your odds start to go down so far that you will be shopping for that asset for a very long time. For
Mm.
us, it's really important to understand I want to buy whatever it is cheap. And the other part is these assets are being shopped for by distress, but this is inventory. This is not how I'm building a rental portfolio. This is not how I'm finding land development projects. I'm buying something that has big title problems, buying it cheap, cleaning the problems up, taking it to market, and I'm making profit. My goal is to do that as fast as I can. And I have no interest in maintaining any of those assets.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So
Every
now
once
that
in a while
we,
you will, but not common.
yeah, that's good. That's good. So now that we can have like 30,000 foot view of your
Ah,
business model, can you dive into maybe a case study so we can see what that looks like in a real world application? I know that you had sent in about one of your downtown Austin property projects. Do you want to chat
okay.
about that?
Let's do that. Before I do that, because that's an extreme case, those are fun. In 3 minutes, I'll tell you what a standard typical avatar looks like after 10 years of experience and knowing exactly what I'm going for and culling out the things that don't have a lot of problems or that have too many. Our
Beautiful.
most common target these days is an asset that's worth about 200,000 as it sits. Not ARV, not nothing. As it is right now, listed on MLS, it's worth 200 grand. I want to be in that for between 50 and $70,000 all in. And that property is generally going to take me about 120 days from the moment we identify it as a lead. We talk to somebody on the phone. It's a warm lead. From that moment in the time I've closed it, fixed the issues, and listed on MLS and gotten paid, about 120 days. That's
Okay.
fast, but
Yeah.
that's a very standard property. So we'll invest 50 to 70 grand to make 100 to 150. That's very common.
Excellent.
Now the
So
outliers.
yeah, before
Oh,
we
go
get to the
ahead.
outlier though, real quick question. So if someone's listening to this and they're used to like in our audience, we have lots of flippers, like where either they are doing things through double closing or wholesaling, or even maybe they're using a lender to close on properties, do traditional flips. How do you go about, or what, not how do you specifically go about, but how can beginners who are looking to go about this business model fund these types of things if they don't have 50 to 70 grand sitting in a bank account to be able to take these types of deals down? Are you able to get lending on this, or how do you go about doing that?
You're not going to get traditional lending. And that's one of the things that sets people apart. A lot of people are unable to do it without traditional lending. As a result, fewer people can do it, less competition, more opportunity for us. The ways
Mm,
you're going to be able to do it, there's a couple ways. One of them is you're going to have a private lender who is willing to lend on a riskier asset like this. In the beginning, you're going to have a hard time pitching that. But if you figure out how to pitch it to a person, to a lender, if you're buying a 50% share of the property that's worth 100 grand, you're buying 50,000 worth of equity. If you're only spending $6,000, you have a lot of equity coverage, although it might take the lender a lot longer to get to it if you as an operator default. There's always lots of equity. So that's important. Hard money loans won't work, but you do need capital or a partner like somebody that has the capital or someone like us who understands it's a great partner. Now, the last part is I never cared about seller financing. I never looked at creative solutions. But in the last couple of years, as our operation has grown, we've gotten much more sophisticated. I started pitching this to people and saying, look, I'm only giving you $20,000 for your share. However, this is an extreme risk for me. I'm only going to give you 2,000 today, and you're going to have to carry the other 8,000. I'm going to pay you in 6 weeks, 6 months, 12 months, whatever, some period. So I've got to take control so I can solve these problems. And so I basically do creative transactions with some of these folks.
that's really cool. That's really cool. I'm going to dive into that in just a bit, but let's get back to that really fun outlier case study that we were talking about.
So that particular case was in Austin, Texas. It was a half an acre worth 1.2 million, a million and a quarter. So this is Austin, super expensive, super valuable. The moment you leave downtown, it's all residential. And in this area, all the houses were built out, like high-end stuff. And this was a half acre with two completely crappy houses on it. And with
Mm.
everything built out like that, with this remaining there, it's a big problem. So I get a call from Kyle Westbrook, who's now my business partner.
No,
This was
right
the
on.
first time he called me. Oh, wow. I didn't even think about this. This is an origin story.
Love it.
Kyle calls me and says, I'm trying to wholesale this property. And he says it's worth 600 or 700 grand. He's got someone who's willing to buy it for him. He's got a contract, but there's 20 owners. Okay, I can deal with 20.
Okay.
There's 6 memorandums on the thing. So someone has tried to sell it. Multiple people have tried to sell it 6 times and it's failed. So I identify there's some issues. And before we get digging too far, I understand this is a big family tree. And I explained to him how to trade these folks down. You have lots of owners. There's some different judgments and liens from child support to delinquent taxes. Kyle goes back and trades a few of these people down to $500. We believe they own 1/20th, so about 5%. They're willing to take $500 for their share because they know it's a mess. It's been a mess for 30 years. We deploy mobile notary, lawyer, deeds, cashier's check. Actually, it was cash and a closing package. So they go meet him at the gas station, close. We pick up several shares of this. And at this point, we're in the game. I'm willing to pay taxes now. I'm willing to spend more money because we own. At this point, I think we picked up like, I don't know, a few percent. Although I thought it was a 20th. We get back to the office, start doing all the work. And when you pull on the thread here and it just starts to unravel.
Yeah.
Unraveled, dude. We ended up about 65 owners when we concluded our research.
65
Yes.
owners.
Yes.
Oh my God. Oh my gosh. So, like, how do you not just be like, okay, yeah, this has been fun. We're going to walk away at this point?
See, I realized I picked up a couple shares. I think I owned maybe 5% at the time, but I only spent a couple grand. Also, during that time, I did the research and realized this thing is probably worth $1 million a quarter. So when you do that math, you say, let's do 1,250,000 times 0.05. If I own 5% and I'm in it for 2 or 3 grand, but my 5% is worth 62, I'm already in the money. I can file a partition lawsuit, have a judge go sell it, and I just get my 5% and I actually make money already.
Wow. Wow. Now that is cool. I've never heard it broken down like that before. That's pretty legit.
That's an interesting option. Here's another one. There was a tax lawsuit filed, but the order of sale was not issued yet. I can just go and intervene in that tax lawsuit and be requested to be named as a defendant and submit my deeds. I'm now a defendant, and I could just go sit back and let the sheriff go auction it off, and I could go get my excess proceeds.
Wow.
That would be another option.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I'm loving this. I'm loving this. All right. So you've got 60 plus owners and you realize, okay, you've got a decent, you're in the money. You're in the money now. So what are the next steps? What did you do?
We had to build this massive family tree. So a couple of the owners were nice and friendly. They were older and they don't give a shit. They were willing to give us their deeds. They don't care. So we still paid them. I don't want a deed for free because there's no consideration. That's not a valid transaction. Now, you could argue that it could be a gift and whatever, but I don't play that game. So we did sit down with a couple of folks and really help flesh out some stuff that we were not able to find very quickly and easy through the genealogy research. But we built the family tree out. It was like 67 people is what it totaled out to be. Yeah, I know. Charlie, I see you laughing. You're like, what? The thing is, when we were all huddled up, there were 4 of us in the conference room, and like one of us would go to the bathroom, one would go get lunch, whatever. And every time a person would come back, we're like, 3 more, 10 more, 15 more. Like it was a fucking joke, dude.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
We bought 65 owners, but we actually bought 67 owners, but there were only 65. So 2 people, we made a mistake. They were cousins with no interest. They each got $1,000.
I'm sure they'll give you a great Yelp review.
Right. But at this point, we fleshed out the family tree with a high margin of confidence, and family corroborated it. We did really good. It took us about 3 days, full time, 4 people, 3 days, hammering away. Once we did that, we knew there was a lot of risk because all it takes is 1 or 2 people to say this property's worth $1 million, and sour the whole thing. Time was not on our side. So we set up like a command station, name, address, phone number, general identity of all 65 people and location. Some of them were in the city, some of them were in other states, but we narrowed down about 45 people that all lived generally in South and Southeast Austin. And we started pounding through the phone calls, making agreements, 600, 900, 1200, just all these different prices. And we would immediately send out a DocuSign contract to them and we'd get it signed within hours. And once we started getting those back, we deployed 2 people in Austin and we went and got $100,000 out of the banks. We had to do it in different appointments through different banks because they don't just have 100 grand.
Right.
And we sent guys out with 15 grand a piece and the deeds and a mobile notary. So we were coordinating mobile notaries, our people to meet, get deeds signed. And it was this orchestration over the next week we got about 40 deeds in that week by this.
That's crazy. That is crazy. Wow.
The affidavit of heirship was massive. It was the biggest one I've ever done. I don't even know how many dead people there were, but usually you'll do one affidavit of heirship for a dead person and they'll have 3 or 4 heirs and it's, 3 pages. In this case, we started with the deceased parents and or the grandparents actually, and we put affidavit of fact concerning their names. And then we listed each deceased person so that it was one large affidavit with all of the deceased people in it. And it was 3/4 of a page. And so the title to the affidavit of heirship was 3/4 of the first page.
Oh my gosh.
It was massive. But the key thing to know is we didn't do that for several weeks. We spent our time aggregating all the interest the best we could. And we didn't have clear title because there was no affidavit of heirship of record. But that was just a thing we would do in time. We needed to collect these deeds as quick as we could before people started changing their mind and rejecting and wanting to cause fights.
Because you knew that if something went south, you still had these shares that you owned that, again, you have those 2 backup plans that if something goes wrong, you can always cash out, right?
Exactly. Another key concept that folks don't understand is when you have more than one owner, multiple owners, usually the first shares I buy need to be cheap for multiple reasons. One of them, I'm not going to do this unless I get a lot of equity. But one of the other reasons is the last 3 or 4 people may be knuckleheads. And they might say, I want 10 million. The property's only worth $1 million. You might have a problem. You might have to file a lawsuit to get it to sell. You might have to overpay. I actually overpaid a property in New Braunfels, a little cottage house. We bought it for $70,000. It was worth 200 grand, needed to be remodeled. But I bought 99.7%. This one dude who lived in Peru owned 1/3 of 1%. I paid this bonehead $20,000. His share was worth a couple grand, but I'd already gotten for a great price 99.3%, 0.7%. So it really didn't matter to me what share he owned. It was the remaining share. And I'm just looking at a budget saying, I'm all in for 50. If I give this asshole 20 grand, he's being overcompensated by 5 times. Doesn't matter. It fits in my budget and I'm killing it. So pay him. He held me over the barrel.
That makes total sense, especially if I can imagine that if some of these people, they're all related. So if some of these people like call so-and-so and like, hey, did you get an offer? And it's like, yeah, he paid me $1,200 and you're offering them $500. They'll be like, what's going on? That makes a lot of sense.
So that does happen. And I don't want people to think we're shysters or bad business people, but the truth is people's shares vary in terms of size. Another thing is some of these people had judgments and liens for not paying child support, things like that. So there are all these factors that go into valuing their share that's remarkably different than their cousin that also owns 2%.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That makes total sense. Starts getting more complicated with every layer, right? Yeah.
Now, This is such a complicated file. I don't want folks to get scared and say, this was fun to listen, but I don't want to get myself involved in that. This is one of the most radical files we've done. Typically, it's 5 or less owners, and your purchase price is so much lower. And you also can get a contract with each person and send it to title. And once you get contracts with all of the people who you've each dealt with separately, you can then close. So it can be done much differently than I'm telling you here.
Got it. That's a really good point. That's a fantastic point. So just yeah, just disclaimer, this is just like fun, extreme.
Yeah.
We're just geeking out over how messy this can get. All right. So 67 owners, where are we now?
Mhm. At this point, we spent the time to aggregate 40, 45 owners, somewhere in that range. And it took us the next 3 or 4 months to work through the last ones. A couple people were missing. No one knew where they are. We had to really work to find them. The one lady who was responsible for 4 of the 6 memorandums had tried to sell this for years. She paid taxes for quite a few years and wanted reimbursement. She claimed it was all hers, things like that. We negotiated with her hard. She wanted 90% of the proceeds. We already owned like 70% of the property. In the end, I ended up having to file a lawsuit against her. And what I ended up doing is there was an outstanding tax balance of like 80 or 90 grand. I went and paid it all off and said she actually owned 10%. Her and her sister were the 2 largest stakeholders at that time. Everybody else had small fractions. I went back to her and said, look, I paid the 80 grand in taxes plus 10 in legal fees to solve these problems, plus a survey, plus demolishing the buildings. I'm in this 120 grand, or I don't know, at that point it might have been 150. But I went to her and said, you need to reimburse me. You own 10%. That's 15,000 of 100. It's 10% of 150 grand. You need to reimburse me. And if you don't, there's common law out there that gives me a creditor claim against you. I'm going to sue you, and I have the right to foreclose on your interest in the property. So pay me
Wow.
my share
Yeah.
or get real.
Right. Now, let me ask you this question. For people that are listening to this that are not really involved with messy title, things like that, the word lawsuit might like automatically create like some type of triggering like trauma. Can you
Hold on a
talk a
minute. Let
little
me
bit?
ask you that.
Yeah.
This is you brought it up a great way. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let me ask you
No, yeah.
this. Kendall, what do you think of when you think of lawsuit?
Most of the time, it's a bad thing. Most of the time, it's we want to avoid lawsuits altogether. Like, I don't want
Why
to be
though? Why?
because I don't want to lose money. I don't want to be sued. I don't want to have a judgment against me. I don't want it to go
Okay.
wrong if I bring it up to someone else. It can be super expensive. We're just trained avoid lawsuits at all costs, which is sounds like that's totally different. It's a totally different mindset because you're
Yeah.
using these lawsuits as a
It's a
tool
tool.
in your business, right? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this is a very important topic to bring up. If you're going to be in real estate, you will deal with litigation eventually. And if you're in a business model that includes it, getting good at it is really valuable. We're at this point, we're experts in my opinion. My legal bills today are about 50,000 a month consistently. And that shows you what kind of part of our business that is. I was told in the deposition last month that I'm a plaintiff in over 30 lawsuits currently. I actually hadn't counted my internal docket, but he was informing me that I was and
Wow.
asked if I enjoyed this shit, to which I said yes.
Yes, I do.
But when you think of a lawsuit, you think of the woman who spilled their hot coffee at McDonald's. It was millions of dollars. You think of Purdue Pharma, or you think of the guy who lost his leg in a truck accident and had his insurance company pay $3 million. That's what you think of. But those are outliers, just like my 65-person lawsuit. So my typical file has about a $10,000 per file budget for legal, and that could be documents, settlements. It might mean filing a lawsuit, but the typical lawsuit in this area might cost me 10,000, 20,000 bucks. These never go to trial. They 95% of the time settle. And most times, the moment you file it, it lets the counterparty know you're serious, you're not effing around, and they come back and settle with you quickly.
Mm,
Some of our big suits, I've spent $100,000, $200,000 in legal fees over 18 months just pounding away. That's a real lawsuit. You have
yeah.
full discovery. You've got all the way up to trial, week before trial. That's real. But
Yeah.
that's not 90% of this.
Right. Now, just to clarify, this is not like you're going out and suing to get money. This is to basically, I don't want to say force because maybe that's not the best word, but this is to get
Solve.
to solve from a legal instrument standpoint to get them to the next step, right?
There's a problem that already exists way before I showed up between family members, co-owners, sometimes creditors, sometimes lenders. There's a big problem. When I show up, 75% of the time, I can get it solved without lawsuits. Lawyers are still involved to draft paperwork, but most times we can do a workout. A third of the time, you need to file a lawsuit to either cure a title defect that can't be fixed with an affidavit. You actually have to get a quiet title judgment. Sometimes you have to set other judgments and liens or prior judge's orders aside, so you have to file something for that. Sometimes it's very rarely do you actually have to sue a person because they haven't paid for their share of the taxes. Although it does happen, it's not common. So this really is an instrument. I don't know, like a contract is an instrument. It's an instrument to solve an issue, really.
If you're enjoying this episode of the Only Land Fans podcast, please let us know by subscribing and leaving a review. Now let's get back to the action. Yeah, that's a great reframe because I know I'm not dealing with tons of messy title stuff. I probably have the same reaction to that word. Oh my gosh, avoid everything, avoid all things lawsuit. So thank you for clarifying that. All right, so once you got that chain of ownership settled, what did the next steps look like? What were the outcomes of this particular deal?
The very last, there were a couple of folks towards the end that did just what you suggested, and it's obvious is going to happen. They called family members and said, "How much did you get? How much did I get?" And they held me over the barrel. They knew that we'd owned the majority of it, and there were back and forth negotiations. Several times I ended negotiations because I was working with the 10% owner, trying to decide what was going to happen there. So I backed off from those people and said, "I'm going to have to sue your aunt anyway. If you don't get on board, I'm just going to put you in her basket at the end." And that helped settle a couple people.
I would imagine. Wow.
Ultimately, in the end, what I ended up doing with her is I ended up settling after I filed the lawsuit and said, we agreed to go to market together, and she gets 5% of the net proceeds. She owned 10%, but I'd paid taxes. I had done at this point, I probably had 20,000 in legal fees from affidavits, deeds, settlement statements, all the stuff. I told her, "I'm going to get credit for doing some of that work, and you're going to retain some." So she
Mm.
got 5% of the proceeds, and I got 95%, and then we went and sold together.
That's a great way to avoid like having to pay up front. Like we'll just settle it after. That's cool. That's really
That's
cool.
what you do with sticky owners. Like when you have multiple owners and one of them, you pick up enough equity on the other part of it. I don't want to give everyone the opportunity to do that. Otherwise, this is a free service I'm doing and not making any money. But if I pick it up on the first 4 shares, or maybe the share 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, that second one I just put off. And at the end, I say, "You know what? It just works now. Why don't you go to market with me?" And it's less adversarial that way.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's very cool. Great nugget. Great nugget. So how much did you guys make on that deal?
At $1 million, we paid 250,000 all in. That included the 80 grand in taxes, purchasing shares, some legal, 250 all in. I sold for 1,250,000 on the market.
Wow. And so you
$20
mentioned that
bucks.
these were like really rough houses. Did you have to tear down? Like who was the end buyer? What did that look like?
So the interesting thing is I can tell you who those were because I've been through it, but typically I don't think about it and I don't care. And we go list it on the market. And if it's land, we run the comps. If it's buildings, we run the comps. And I just go put it on the market, and it's the listing service. I don't have to pitch it. I don't have to position it. Realtors show
Yeah,
up with their clients and the market will absorb it. That's a
that's
function of using
fantastic.
the listing service.
Yeah, nice. And so you just listed it like as is. There's no repairs or anything that you made to it. It was just
Yeah.
you got it.
Our money's made on the legal work and fixing the title issues. The last thing I want to do is go pick up a 20% margin on a bunch of remodels. Now, in this case, a builder demolished the houses and built a bunch of new houses there.
Got it. Got it.
But
Yeah.
but you identified a key thing. I don't go do the construction. When it's done, I haul the trash out, mow the grass, trim the trees, and it goes to the listing service like that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's so good. So good. So let's come down to earth now because since we went down this really cool rabbit hole.
Yeah.
If someone's listening to this and they're like, listen, I think distressed is where I need to get into this. Logan, I'm sold. Where do they even begin to find these distressed properties and things like that?
The best place, this is the down to earth approach. This is my origin. This is how I still like it to look most times. Buy a delinquent tax list, call those people. You can filter it by location or value of property or whatever, but don't put too many filters on it. You want the folks to be behind a couple years on taxes, so at least 5 to 10 grand in delinquent taxes. And just call those people, man. It's very simple to start. And here's a key thing. I always talk about the extreme matters, but 70 or 80% of this is just multiple owners you have to find and get them all to sign off. Maybe a third, 80% of them have judgments or liens or have a seller that doesn't want to sell, the fourth person or whatever. 70% of this is just finding the people and rounding them up. And the neat thing is when it's delinquent taxes, that means there's no mortgage. Otherwise, the lender would have paid the taxes. So there's no mortgage. But another item here is that means there's much more equity.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if there's no mortgage, that likely means it's old ownership.
Right.
Many times you have deceased people in the title chain. As a result, you have multiple owners. Delinquent tax is the dummy answer to go straight to the problems.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say they find that they get this tax delinquent list and they start calling. And what are the next steps for them? Like, how do they evaluate as is value? Do they run comps to figure out what the as is value is and then do the percentage? Or how do you go about doing that?
No, we make it very user friendly and simple. I'm just going to use a $100,000 property value. That's what the CAD says. I'm only looking at that for order of magnitude pricing. Is it worth 100, 500, 1 million? Let me just get a reasonable idea. So for our situation, it's worth 100 grand.
Okay.
And there's 15,000 in delinquent taxes. Very easy numbers. My offer is going to be somewhere between $500 and $10,000 to the seller, net to the seller. That's it. And this property, we said 100 is what the appraisal district says. Might be worth 70, might be worth 140. The appraisal district can be off. But if it's behind 15,000 in taxes and you pay 10 to the owner, you're in it for 25, you can't mess that up.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good. Now let me ask this. If someone is doing
hold on.
Yeah.
Let me go back. It almost sounds too simple, but here's my pitch to people.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not buying your property. I'm not buying your interest in the property. I'm buying it. I'm taking your seat at the table. Remember, my seat at the table at your Thanksgiving table has Jenny, your cousin who you hate, your stepdad, John, who you absolutely hate, and Josh, who's your brother, who hates you. There's 4 people that don't get along. I don't know how long it's going to take me to clear this. You guys have been trying to do it for a long time. So don't think of it as me buying or sharing the property. I'm just buying a seat at that table, and I'm hoping I can fix all those issues that y'all haven't fixed in 10 years. That's an easy way to get the person to disassociate the price that you're paying them from the value of the property.
Yeah, that's a really good psychological tool. That's really good. Hey, I'm buying your problem. So how much?
Boom.
Yeah, that's really good. So if someone is looking to do this and they're newer to this distressed property space, do they have to have a lawyer on their team or several lawyers? You mentioned genealogists. What do they, like a brand new person, who are those key people that they need to have on their team to be able to do these types of properties?
Anybody that's listening here is probably wholesaling, land subdividing, flipping. You're already in the game if you're on Kendall's show, probably. You already have 80 to 90% of what it takes to do a large portion of these deals, but you're afraid. You're afraid of the unknown. You don't know what's next, and you're scared of walking in a dark room without turning the lights on. That's what this really is. But if these folks would say, let me just get this delinquent tax list and start calling people, and whatever problem is in front of me, I'll start to try to solve, they would be absolutely astounded. Oh, and don't be afraid to make the low offer. You can't overpay, because then your story won't sound like my story. You'll have the worst deal because it was expensive. You didn't make any money and it was hard. But I get a title report done, and there's a company called Pro Title USA. I don't have an affiliation, but for a couple $100, they'll run you a darn good third-party title report. And when you get folks that are engaged, negotiate a low price. You'll have this conversation and you start to find out there are multiple owners. You can Google the parent's obituary, or they'll flat out tell you. So you start to conceptualize what this is and just do your best. Write a contract that's got an option in it and send it to title. Maybe get your Pro Title USA report, but start working through those issues. Be very hyper logical. Hey, I want to buy it from you, but you have another brother? Okay, I'm only buying half. Okay. We got to lower the price because brother's been missing for 3 years. You don't know him, right? Okay. They're going to ask you, what's the next step? I'm not really sure. Actually, I'm learning your file because it's unique. So I'm going to get this to title. And when we figure out what the next step is, I'm going to call you and we're going to work through that together. Is that cool, Mr. Seller? Yeah.
Listen up, land fans. This is huge. We're bringing you the one and only Pace Morby, star of A&E's Triple Digit Flip and the mastermind behind $450 million in real estate deals. He's coming to our virtual meetup on Thursday, December 5th to share how he's applying his creative financing genius to land deals. Head to olfmeetup.com to save your spot today. That's olfmeetup.com. This is the kind of opportunity that changes everything. Yeah, that's really good. So you touched on a really important point when you started talking about mindset. I've worked with a lot of people. I have coaching clients, and very often the first sniff of, oh, this is going to be different. This is not going to be like super smooth sailing. It's not just going to be like I submitted to title and the next day I get my check. Like people start freaking out. So can you talk a little bit about what mindset do you have or did you need to have before you even got proof of concept that yes, there are problems and it's going to be okay? Can you talk a little bit about that?
You said it absolutely the best. Yes, there are going to be problems and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
One of my favorite sayings that I heard Alex Hormozy say the other day, don't know if he originated or not, but he said, no one knows what they're doing. Some people do it anyway.
Yeah.
That was like, that was, man, I was like, love hearing that because that's our business. You don't know what you don't know, man. But the thing is, people doing this are above average intelligence. They probably have a couple dollars in the bank or can find some money somewhere. They're decent with resources. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing what they're currently doing. A lot of that is already there. You haven't done it yet. You just don't know. But the moment you start testing those things on low priced or low risk opportunities, man, you start to figure this stuff out real fast.
That's incredible. I love that. I love that. Now, let's jump over to your team, right? You mentioned a lot about your team. You've got 20 people. You've mentioned a genealogist, different attorneys, huge tax or huge legal bill every month. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about who were those first hires on your team when you started building that out in this particular business model? Who are some of your first hires?
I think this really matters because folks have been watching the internet and people have been selling them services in the last 5 or 6 years as the market's gotten hot. And you think it's supposed to be a VA, you think it's supposed to be a lead manager, you think you're supposed to have all these departments. And that's not what I did. I got to the point where by myself, I was making 700 so thousand a year net. And I'm working all day, all night, 7 days a week. I'm a slave to this stuff, but I'm happy. I was never wealthy and this was getting me there. And it was the best opportunity. So I just gave it all. And I really looked at it closely because I knew I couldn't run like that forever, but I did want to grow. So my first hire was an assistant, $40,000 a year job. And I just said, look, you're going to do stuff that I think you can do. So I'm taking stuff off my plate and putting it on yours. And that helped me pick up another couple $100,000 a year because I wasn't registering my vehicle. She was doing it. I wasn't calling and making doctor's appointments. She was doing it. I wasn't driving to pick up my mail merge package. She was doing it. She was putting the stamps on stuff back then. I don't do a lot of mailers anymore, but I just offloaded stuff so my time could be spent doing my core competency. And that bumped me up by another 20 or 30% in annual income. And it was
That's
just me and an
huge.
assistant.
Yeah, that is huge. And I love how you frame that because you put those two figures together really closely. You paid $40,000 for an assistant so you can make a couple of $100,000. I think that is really important that especially when people that are not used to having a team or building out a business, they see things as I can put my own stamps on my stuff and I can save this and I can save that, but there's
Yeah.
opportunity cost to that. Yeah, I love that.
A lot of folks also will start to hire and pay with money they may not have yet, or they're planning to be bigger. I would work and earn and put this money in the bank. And I decided to make a hire with this lady, and I had $500,000 in my personal checking account that I distributed myself from the business. I got this money, and I finally made my first hire. So I always hired late, which means I work harder until then. But it's a budgetary consciousness. It's a high level of discipline.
Yeah. And you don't have that. I'm sure that the stress of, oh my gosh, we have to do X in revenue this month so I can pay my employees. That's a
Mhm.
stress that I think is probably like a huge business killer right then there is like, how do I pay for my team? You
Uh,
just answered it.
I
Right.
was losing deals because I didn't have enough of my own bandwidth. That's why I did it. I wasn't having problems paying. I was losing deals.
Yeah,
So
that's a good distinction.
that was the first hire. Right after that, my mom started coming and helping, so more of an administrative person. And then I met a guy named Ryan, who's now one of my business partners. One thing I did identify is this was becoming something that required some specific knowledge and kind of unique ideology if you really want to be great at it. And I wanted to be great at it. I was getting great. So when I met Ryan, he was learning real estate. And my pitch was, hey, why don't you come work with me for a year? Learn with me. Let's do these deals. And I'm going to give you a third and I'm going to keep 2/3. We'll use my money. I'll show you how to do it. And he had a job. So he was doing this on the side. After the year, he's like, this is great. I want to do this full time and quit my job. And I said, great. Let's start you a company. I own half, you own half. I'll put a bunch of money in it and I'm gonna help continue to help you and let's grow it.
Yeah,
So I grew through partners.
that's really good. Digging into the partner component really quickly. I see a lot of people who enter into real estate like in a partnership. They haven't done anything on their own yet. They just start as a partnership. And I think there are pros and cons to those things. What's your perspective? I know that you didn't take on a partner until you had really developed your business and started generating revenue. But what's your thought process on when is the appropriate time to partner?
Some people never do. For me, I had a hard time finding high level operators and thinking they were going to stick around. Once you
Mhm.
teach them all this, and a lot of people are independent, they want to go. And I didn't want to keep all the information with me. It was this weird place. And I just remember thinking, man, if I can help this dude get to his financial goals and his business dreams, and I can own a piece of that business, that's how I can work with him for a long time.
Yeah, that's good.
So, but a very important thing to that though is a lot of people say, let's go into business. They get an LLC, they start a business together right off the bat. Not me. I want to date before I get married. Don't want any surprises.
Yep,
So
yep.
me and Ryan dated for an entire year. We worked side by side. We probably did 20 deals together that year. And at the end of that year, what I was able to do is I spent so much time with him. I knew how he talked to his wife. I knew how he treated his family. I knew how he was with his money. Was he always behind the eight ball or was he able to save a little and manage okay? During a year, we had goods and bads. So I got to see how does he behave when he's stressed or mad at me or whatever. And that was the biggest part outside of the determination and the drive and the IQ that was requisite. The other part is, can I roll with this dude for 10 or 15 years?
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really good. And it sounds super simple, but I think it sounds simple because it's a fundamental, but it's a fundamental of business for a reason, right? Like it's so important because a bad business, like a bad business partnership, like that is terrible. Like it's terrible. So very cool. All right. So
Yeah.
coming back to your team. So you hired an assistant, you had your mom working some administration
Mhm.
stuff, you brought on Ryan. At what point did you say, you know what, I need a genealogist? Because I think that's one of the coolest flexes for a real estate investor.
Yeah.
I have a genealogist that is in my business. So can you talk to us about that?
So that was around 2019, 2020. Dave came in and He was part real estate, part genealogist, and that's what he chose to focus a lot on. There's so
Mm.
many different resources. There are trade associations for these big groups of nerds. They're genealogists. They behave a lot like engineers, actually.
Ah.
But we were just digging so many people up so quickly, and we had to be so proficient at it. When Dave came into the organization, it was a good match, and we were able to have the right amount of need. So it developed strangely almost organic. But at that time, we had to do a private investigator because we were paying a lot of people. We had a hard time getting the attention we wanted or the quality. So right around that era, it was lawyer, private investigator, and genealogist, all about in the same like period.
Mm. Wow. And for people listening and they're like, what on earth would you need a private investigator full time working for your business? What do they do for you? Calling all ambitious land flippers, ready to transform your business with proven systems and processes? Imagine this. One of my students recently closed 2 land deals and got another under contract in just 24 hours. That's the power of a well-oiled land flipping machine. My exclusive coaching program is specifically designed for action takers just like you. We'll build out your entire operation from lead gen to dispo, implementing these systems on real deals from day one. But hurry, I'm only accepting 3 new students until 2025. If you've done deals, have a growth mindset, and are ready to scale, visit kindlecall.com now. Let's turn your land business into a consistent profit powerhouse.
They find people and information that we either have not been able to find or need to get back to the business case and let them do the digging. So early on, we were hiring third-party private investigators. We would find people that couldn't be found, didn't want to be found. Maybe someone was adopted when they were young and they never got to meet their dad, and the mom said, "We're leaving. This guy's a bad guy." They go off, meet stepdad, gets adopted, different name, goes to Chicago, and there's nothing seemingly connecting him. But when his dad dies and leaves 3 houses in San Antonio without a will, and the only son is that kid, you need that kid. And to find that person, it's not rocket science, but it might take 3 weeks of a person working every day. They might have to drive out there to the site and interview old neighbors that are in their 80s. Then they get a lead in Chicago. They got to go there. They've got to talk to people and meet people and ask these questions to find that dude.
Yeah.
So we're busy trying to do multiple deals. We have other files we have to work on. None of us can just dedicate 3 weeks to one man. Like you can't do that. That's where we were hiring private investigators. You know, when you might spend $4,000 or $5,000 to make that private investigator full time on your project for 3 weeks. But when you're looking at a deal, I'll go back to we used a private investigator on our Austin deal. We made $1 million on that deal, and we only spent 250 grand. Do you think it moves the needle if I pay a PI 5 grand to track someone down in Chicago? Doesn't even move the needle.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. And it's that level of attention to detail and commitment to solving those issues that's the value that you're bringing to these deals. That's how you're able to go above and beyond what other people wouldn't normally do.
One of the reasons that I feel so comfortable doing that is you get a lot of folks in real estate and they start to make money, things are going well, and they start to they're spending, they're buying the bigger house, the more cars, all that stuff. Dude, me and my wife lived in our separate little apartments up until 2017. When we bought our house, I almost had $1 million in my bank account, my personal account, not the business. We moved out of our little apartments and bought ourselves a $250,000 house. And I still had all that money left. We were living so far below our means. But when you put yourself in that financial situation, I'm faced with entering a deal that I have to rip a check for 20,000 and spend 3 grand on a private investigator, 5,000 on taxes, and 10 grand on legal. So I'm all in for 40, 50 grand, but it's worth 200,000. I have the ability to not think twice, rip that check, and move on. And if I mess up, if I screw up and lose 5 grand or on a PI that can't get me what I need, if I'm looking at $1 million over here and now it's 5,000 less, I don't really care. I'll do that 3 times to get it right once.
Yeah. What I love so much about that, Logan, is, and this should be like business 101, but I think it's very easy for people to get wrapped up. I know, speaking from experience, it's easy to start getting invested in deals and be emotionally invested where you just want to make it work. And you
Yeah.
start forgetting about, okay, what is the ROI on the things that I'm spending? And what, like, bring it back down to the dollars and cents in the deal. What am I spending versus what I can make? And I love that approach because every answer that you've given us is driven by that. And I think that's so important. And it's easy to lose track when you're a baby business owner.
Let's think about what affects those decisions, right? I always want to go back to the foundation. If you don't have a lot of deals in the pipeline, you don't have as much money coming in right now, you already spent all this time on it, you're just going to try to do what it takes. You might should abandon that deal. You might should go do a different one. Or you might be so far vested that you're going to do things in the deal that you don't think are the great idea, but you're pressured. You're not thinking clearly. And the more money you have in your bank account, the more clearly you think when it comes to financial and decisions that involve precautions. So that is why, for me, it wasn't about having the money to flex. It was more about being stable and safe and secure so that I can make the right decision that has no pressure for anything other than just to be right.
Yeah, bingo. I've heard it said before that you should never let your bank account make your business decisions. And I think that's
Ooh.
what you're talking about right there because it's true. If you're like, I have to get this deal done because it's the only one in your pipeline, like now you're in a scarcity mindset and you're just trying to survive. And we know all kinds of bad things happen. Like your brain doesn't work right whenever you're in that kind of situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, let me ask you this question, Logan. So it sounds like negotiation is a huge part of what you do. Can you talk a little bit about how do you develop your negotiation skills? Are there resources out there that like books that you really like, or maybe people that you follow? How do you sharpen those negotiation skills and keep them sharp?
I've enjoyed listening to Chris Voss. He did the book Never Split the Difference.
Yeah, great
That
book.
was that stood out to me. And also How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's not a negotiation book, but it's a book about people. And people do business with folks they know and trust. So in real estate deals, you spend a lot of time communicating, getting to learn things, you're discovering a lot, you're having to share things. And the better I felt like I could get at communicating in a way that was respectful and kind and helped these folks like me as much as they could, but still be able to deliver messages that weren't always happy or exciting or fun. It was a skill. But those are the only two resources, man. It was a lot of at bats for me. We spent a lot of time at the plate.
Yeah, that's very evident. I think that you are probably one of the best communicators in the real estate space that I've had
Oh,
the opportunity to listen to. You can take some really complex things and make them very easy to understand. And when you couple that with the understanding of that this is a people business and it's people first, I think that's a winning combination. So that's I'll give you your flowers for that. That you do a fantastic job at that. Let me ask you, are there any specific tools or resources that you would recommend to people that are listening to this and they want to get involved, they want to learn more about distressed property acquisitions? Where can they go? What would you recommend?
probably there are a couple of resources on Google that I would recommend. They're free. If you'll look up title underwriter manuals, you just
Mm,
Google it, like Texas property title underwriter manual. All the big Stewart Title, Old Republic, they all put them out. Some of them are dated, but that's okay. Those are underwriting manuals that help underwriters understand what to do when they have a problem. And that's like us getting a view into the locker room saying, if the trust that owns the property, the trust document is lost, what do we do? It's going to tell you there are a couple options. One, you can go get a judicial determination. You can go in front of the judge and prove it all up, and he'll give you an order to solve your missing trust document. Or you can do what's called a trust certificate. Any person knowledgeable about the trust can be an affiant, and under the text of the trust code, you can sign a form that's a trust certificate where you're stating this was the grantor, this is the grantee, these are the terms, this is the property, whatever. It's basically a declaration that a person signs to create a new version of the trust, even if they weren't a member of the old one. So those are the different options you'll learn. If an underwriter doesn't have the document, they go and it's do this, then this. That entire book has hundreds of options. So you don't know what the problem is going to be. But if you spend a couple of weekends reading this book, you're going to understand all this interesting stuff about titles that you will inadvertently run into when you start calling people who are behind on their taxes.
That's really good. That's a great resource. Great insider tip right there. So as we wrap up, could you share maybe one or two tactical tips from your experience that would help someone to move the needle today in doing distressed property acquisitions?
Tactical, huh?
You've given us one already. Go get a delinquent tax list, right?
Okay, you mean like action items?
Yeah.
You know what? I would tell you to get access to really good data source. Like their TLO is the best that I've found, and I've paid for almost every one of them. You can find a way to get access to TLO. Your ability to contact people is going to go up remarkably over every other service. And I do not care who says otherwise. There is no program that's better than that. I've paid for IDI Core, CoreLogic, Thomson Reuters, LexisNexis. I've bought every one of those. And
Yeah.
TLO is the best.
So what is TLO and how do you get access to it?
It's basically a data risk mitigation program. The way we originally started using it is when we were doing rental houses, we would use it to verify the information on the applicant's application, to verify name, phone number, all these historical pieces of information they would give us. We use it to verify that, but it also works well to look up phone numbers, addresses, and it also has a relationship diagram, known associates or potential family members, to help identify people.
That's cool.
So the rules change a lot. If you're going to apply, you have to be careful. I think you can say you're not supposed to say you're doing it for marketing.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it for your rental portfolio, or also if you're doing debt collections, if you're buying judgments or liens or tax liens, my God, the janitors sound like they broke something. It works well for that. So getting the best data you can possibly get to get a hold of people, and then your delinquent tax list. Between those two, if you call 20 hours a week, every week, within a month, if you don't have several deals already teed up, then you're not doing one of those first two things.
That's really good. That's really good. Love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to thank you so much, Logan, for just being so generous. You're always incredible as a guest, and you're always so generous with your information. How can we give back to you right now? What types of resources or connections are you looking for?
Call me with your messes. If you got some deals that don't work out well, you don't know what to do with them, we step in and help people, wholesalers, investors, whatever, negotiate their sellers down, solve the problems. I think about 1 in 4 deals in our office now are JV deals.
Wow.
We have a huge referral network. We do a coaching program. We do a lot of JVs with those folks. We do a ton of JVs with folks that just see my wacky ass videos on Instagram and tell me about one they can't fix, and it becomes a JV. So welcome to refer those. Go online and engage. I talk about messes every day on Instagram, and they're fun conversations. Get involved.
Love it. Love it. So if someone wants to reach out to you, if someone wants to follow you, how can they do that? Where do they find you?
The gram. Go send me a direct message on Instagram. I also have a website. It's loganfullmer.com. There's some fun, useful things there.
Awesome. And what is your Instagram handle for those listening?
Logan Fullmer.
There you go. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Logan, thank you so much. This has been absolutely incredible. Thanks so much for joining us. Logan, you are just incredible. Thank you for joining us again. This has been so much fun. And thank you all for joining us and providing so many cool questions and just a great conversation. Join us. We will be back on next week. We'll have another action-packed, value-packed episode of the Only Land Fans podcast. We'd love to have you join us next week. Until then, take care, be safe, and we'll catch you in the next one. If you're interested in hearing from other 7-figure land flippers about how they've started and run their businesses, then join us at onlylandfans.com.
Looking forward to seeing you there.